Hi, let's talk a little bit about piano miking. Um, this is a sort of a miniature piano. It's sometimes called a ship's piano, the size of it. You were maybe wondering why I have such a small piano in my studio. Part of it's a size consideration. Part of it is that this little piano is very unique sounding and actually works really well in a lot of tracks and production, and has a real has a very cool character. And I also have the advantage of having keyscape if I want bigger piano sounds. And it's not that often that I actually need to have access to a large grand piano for productions. Most of the time you don't really need as much of that kind of big sound and capture to put in what would be a multiple layer record with a lot of other instrumentation going on. A big grand piano like that in a big studio is probably more appropriate for stuff where the piano is more of a solo feature. So I'll just go to a studio that has that piano and that space. So this is a little Melody Pro, and there's help and steel pickups that are pickups that are put into pianos. A help and steel is a stage piano that kind of collapsed and was easy to transport, that was used a lot in the 70s. Artists like Jackson Browne would be an example of a help and steel piano being something that was in their touring setup. This was sort of the early prototype. It has a pickup which we can look at in the piano, and there's an output with volume and tone on it. And that's another reason that I like having it, because this little piano having a pickup in it, I can take that output and put it into some pedals and then take a sound from this direct. Yamaha made a small sort of baby grand shaped piano called the CP70 that also has a pickup in it and is used for similar things like that. U2 used a CP70 a lot in their early records. So that's the deal. That's a little bit of background why we have this. We have a few little size appropriate and unappropriate props with it as well. So let's talk about miking the piano. In miking an upright piano, a lot of times what I like to do, and this is the way that I mic'd upright pianos on the Tom Waits records, is put a pair of pencil condensers over the keys, left and right, lows and highs. Sometimes it's nice to use the same microphones. Occasionally we'll use a large diaphragm here, and then a different smaller diaphragm, or just a different mic. Sometimes it's nice to use the same kind of microphones to get a very even capture of the frequencies and color. And then sometimes it's nice to use two very different microphones to really accentuate a certain type of picture for the low end and a certain type of picture for the top. A mono microphone. Depending on how much leakage you're trying to deal with from the ambience of the space, or maybe other instrumentation that's going on, you might want to put the mics down in a little bit. If there's nothing else going on in the space and you're not worried about too much ambience, I like to get them up a little bit, not too close. Now, the other thing that we should talk about is with a full-size upright piano, the soundboard is also in front of the player, where this is really small and compact. Also, like a spinet piano would be a little bit more like this, where you wouldn't have as much of the soundboard extending up in front of the playing. With big upright pianos, I sometimes like to take the face of it off, take the wood covering off the front here, and then put microphones, because the soundboard is going to be extended up here. Do a similar thing and put the microphones here. Obviously, you kind of have to be aware of not making the player uncomfortable. So, maybe the microphone would come in from the side and be here. This type of technique. Get it inside to avoid some of ambient leakage. So you know, it's okay to use one microphone, and sometimes we even put a ribbon mic just up over the player's head. You don't necessarily have to have stereo always. I mean, this piano, especially because it's so small, or you know, I don't need a bunch of mics to get the coverage. You know, one microphone here, if it's an appropriate sound with the ambience and the tone you're going for, it's fine. It's going to kind of pick up the whole thing. You don't have to have two microphones to get the highs and lows, because a lot of times parts are going to be focused in a certain area. Maybe you're only doing like low block chords just to reinforce the bottom end of a production, or you're just outlining a melody. Maybe the piano's not a feature instrument, but it's just part of the picture, and you're adding to it. So you can mic it appropriately like that. I've even put microphones behind. There's a song on the Norah Jones record that I did called Man of the Hour. And what I did for that was I only used 3 microphones for that recording. And there was a vocal mic. And then the way that the piano sounded best capturing the piano in the space is I had a pair of U67s, which are tube condenser mics, large diaphragms. And I just put them just behind Norah, over her shoulders. And it just kind of, what was cool about it is it caught a nice full sort of in the room ambient capture of the piano, and because she was singing and playing at the same time, I got a little ambience on her voice, but she's not a real loud singer, so I didn't really have too much of an issue with the vocal being too dominant in the piano mics. So that was kind of an interesting thing. It was cool. It's really, there are no rules. So one mic is okay. Distant miking is okay. It really just depends on how you're trying to fit it in your production. Another thing that I like to do, and this is true of grand pianos and upright pianos, is I might put a couple higher fidelity mics here. I might use a couple pencil condensers. Let's say we're using a couple pencil condensers, and they're real hi-fi, and we're capturing a lot of detail and a lot of fidelity, but I want to have some of that sort of beat up, aggressive, murky mid-range, just in the same way that laying the bullet mic on the floor and the drum kit and have that sound to blend in. What I'll do is come over to the soundboard, and I'll get I might use a 57, something that's not as high fidelity, and you get down and you listen, just listen to the areas of the soundboard, and I'll just put a microphone somewhere in close that's going to add some cool detail and content to the sound, and I might put a lot of compression on it, or maybe run this through a guitar pedal. And you can do that with a grand piano too. I do that often with a grand piano, where I'll put a Coles or some sort of ribbon microphone up underneath the bottom of the piano. And it's very dark and murky, but it has this cool kind of atmosphere, and it can be a great mic to put in some effects or reverb. But the thing is, even miking a piano like that might be appropriate for a production, just to kind of give you an interesting sound, or might be a cool sound to double like a really nice sampled piano sound in a library, like Keyscape. I mean, sometimes it's cool to have doubled up pianos. Even there's been productions of the Beatles even used techniques where they would play, there'd be multiple players, multiple pianos in the room. I believe at the end of Day in a Life, the big final chord is played on several pianos all at the same time. Phil Spector productions would be another example of multiple pianos, multiple instruments kind of doing the same thing. It kind of gives you these cool textures and combinations. So hopefully that's a little bit of insight into the way that you can mic a upright piano. Let's talk a little bit about a grand piano, and we're going to use this. This guy is going to be our prop. One of my favorite ways to capture a grand piano sound is to use two microphones, but to place one in the heel. This is kind of the heel, because if you look at this as a footprint, obviously in a grand piano, this is a little bit longer. This kind of looks like a footprint. So I sort of refer to this as the heel of the piano, okay? Putting a large diaphragm, and I put my ear in there and listen to what somebody's playing as long as it's not too loud. I want to say be careful with my hearing, but listen for a good spot down in the heel, and I'll put a microphone over the strings in a spot where it feels like the low end is really balanced and the tone that I want to hear. And then I'll put a mic. Sometimes I'll have it facing away from the high frequencies, you know, or these higher note strings, and have it face like this. Sometimes I'll have it face in to capture a little bit more of the total sound, but it's focused on the low end, you know. So this is like isolating it a little bit, isolating the low end a little bit. This is focusing on it, but letting have you overall piano sound. And then I'll mic the upper strings just with one mic, like the same kind of approach. It's like focused, finding the area where the part. I mean, sometimes if the part's being played in the middle of the piano, you're going to want to get the microphone closer over to where the action is, as opposed to just simply miking the high strings, because then it won't sound as focused. It'll be a little bit more diffused. So sometimes it depends on what the part is and where you place the mic. But so you've got the low microphone, and for the high more melodic part perhaps, or just the higher register of the chord voicings. And you know, I'll put it facing into the piano a little bit to kind of get an overall sound, and just depend on how they combine, or I can isolate it a little bit. A lot of pianos are recorded with two pencil condensers like this, just over the strings, over where the hammers hit the strings, excuse me. And that's kind of a cool sound, but I find for me that there's too much in common with the way that this kind of, I mean, I do use it occasionally if I want to get something that does have a lot of common sound between the microphones and the part is quite broad reaching. This is not a bad technique. I'm not saying it's a bad technique. I just don't use it as often because there's a lot in common between these two microphones. I kind of like the approach of this, where I have things that are a little bit more different, and I can really play with the balance a bit more. I can focus it more on the low end or focus it more on the high end. But a lot of pianos are mic'd like this. This is also a very, in pop music, this would be probably more of the approach. I'm always trying to do things that have, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like making pop music, and I love some pop music, but I'm always trying to do things that sound a little bit different and unique, and just also my taste. But this technique is very common. And then, like I was saying, you know, I might have a couple mics on the top, and then I'll put that microphone underneath. You know, it's totally, to isolate a piano, obviously the lid is going to be up on it, right? Once you get your mics in place, sometimes I drape packing blankets over the top of the piano, and like leave like little openings for the microphones to be in there, but the blankets are draped over all the top, so I'm isolating the sound that's in the piano from maybe drums or something else that's playing in the room, or I just don't want the ambience. So know that you can do that as well. Sometimes I've taken the lid completely off so that the top of the piano is completely open. You better ask permission if it's not your piano. A couple other techniques are, you can put a couple mics back from the piano like this. In cardioid, sometimes like an omni microphone, just here, you know, the lid's here. It really is just kind of walk around and listen. Same approach that I would take with an acoustic guitar or any acoustic instrument. Listen in front of it. Now you have to be smart, and you're not going to put your ear in front of a trumpet, because you'll lose your hearing. You should be aware to listen and look for the spots that sound like you're going to capture the best overall balance of what you're going for, in terms of the fidelity and the way the part is translating. So, you know, just to recap, I like primarily putting microphones like this. Here is also a good technique. Don't forget underneath. You can put microphones here. You can put one microphone here and one microphone here. Just be creative. But I just hope that all of those insights and thoughts are helpful.